Powered smart speaker and on TuneIn, iHeart, and on Odyssey. This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. We went from the Biden press conference last week where a minor incursion may not draw much of a response from the U.S. to Secretary of State Tony Blinken saying, no, if one of the 125,000 troops that Putin has amassed on Ukraine's eastern border crosses into Ukraine, there will be a response. And then a lot of loose talk about severe sanctions and and without a lot of definition about what exactly those sanctions would be. Biden asked again about said sanctions and said the following.
I made it clear to early on to President Putin that if he were to move into Ukraine, that there'd be severe consequences, including significant economic sanctions, as well as I'd feel obliged to beef up our presence, NATO's presence on the Eastern Front, Poland, Romania, etc. And but I see, I was watching one of you on television pointing out the fact that, and I think you got it right, whoever it was, I'm embarrassed, I don't remember who, saying that this is all Putin. I don't think even his people know for certain what he's going to do.
Would you ever see yourself personally sanctioning him if he did invade Ukraine?
Yes.
You would?
I would see that.
I know who he wasn't watching, that stupid son of a bitch, Peter Doocy.
And he made that comment. It was so goofy. He was in his friend's boutique in Washington, D.C. in front of a Ruth Bader Ginsburg sweatshirt and some purse with a whale on it. It's not really showing strength. It looked weak and he sounded weak.
Well, he needed to get a new Ruth Bader Ginsburg sweatshirt.
It was so embarrassing.
Walking around town. Now, here's the concern I have.
Yes.
These 8,500 troops that were scrambling and we may deploy to protect the Baltic states, Poland, Romania, et cetera.
Estonia.
The question is, have we vetted these countries, including Ukraine, if we were to provide any military support to Ukraine? Do we know if those countries share our values?
I saw your tweet.
Do we know if they will enforce diversity the way the U.S. military enforces diversity? Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about, because I'm so want the left to live its values in every aspect of life and policy, as they say. This was the message to celebrate LGBTQ month last year from the United States Army.
June is LGBT Pride Month, recognizing lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender Americans. We observe LGBT Pride Month to mark the progress we've made in embracing a society of equality. But we must stay vigilant and continue to call upon our fellow citizens to eliminate prejudice and embrace the celebration of diversity within our nation. The Army relies on the diverse backgrounds, perspectives, and expertise of all members of our total force. It is only with this variety that we are able to address the complex challenges of the world. As we continue to advance the cause of equality for our force, our Army grows stronger. We sustain that strength by promoting and enforcing an open, diverse, and inclusive culture.
Enforcing diversity. Diversity doesn't need an enforcer, but okay, those are the values. So I just don't want American troops facilitating the patriarchy overseas, being forced to throw in with people that are promoting white supremacy. I mean, these are the real priorities for the left and for the Biden administration, as I understand them. So I'm a bit concerned. Maybe our next guest can allay my concerns. She is KT McFarland, former First Deputy National Security Advisor, President Trump, and author of Revolution, Trump, Washington, and We the People. KT, thanks for being with us. Appreciate it.
When you put it the way you just put it, we just sound like such a laughingstock. No wonder Vladimir Putin's walking all over us.
Indeed.
No wonder the Chinese are licking their chops for Taiwan. But when you put it all together like that, it's really pretty scary.
These crippling sanctions that keep being referenced, and Biden's openness because he was asked to personally sanctioning Vlad Putin, and I guess trying to get to the billions of dollars he's stolen over the years. That do anything?
No, it's a joke. I mean, Putin isn't even going to shrug. Sanctioning Putin, what does that mean? He can't come to America? Putin's got billions, maybe even $1 trillion salted away all over the world. He doesn't really care about coming to New York. As far as sending troops, well, okay, 8,000, but they're going to NATO. NATO's already got troops there. I think what Biden is basically signaling, although he's not saying it, is that Ukraine is a done deal. Putin has all the options he wants, everything from, just a minor destabilization of the country to a coup that he could launch with and then install a pro-Russian leader so Russia controls Ukraine's policies, to an armed invasion. And there's not a darn thing that Biden is going to do or can do about it. There's a lot he should do about it, but he won't do any of the stuff that it really matters. And why? It's because of energy. It's because of Germany. Germany, which you need to have any kind of economic, military, political, whatever solution in Europe, isn't going to stand up against the Russians because they depend on Russian oil and natural gas to run their economy. No German political leader, right, left, or center, is going to challenge Russia. So it's, the question I have is, how far does this go? And where does Putin stop? Is he like Hitler? Is he going to just keep going? And what can we do about it? I think there's one single blow we could do that would change the entire dynamic, which is to go back to American energy independence and encourage American exports of oil and natural gas, and have Europe, especially Germany, buy American liquefied natural gas. It's cheap, it's abundant, it's reliable, and not be enthralled to the Russian energy exports. But I don't think President Biden's going to do that.
Do you think it was an overreach or a knee-jerk reaction to have diplomats and their family members get out of U.S. embassies?
I could have called it either way, Amy. On one hand, they don't want to repeat what happened in Afghanistan, where they stayed way too long, where they left American embassy personnel and civilian personnel and military personnel because they didn't want to sort of make it look bad for the Afghan government's prospects. So this time around, they're going to do just the opposite. They're going to pull the rug out early. I don't have a whole lot of sympathy for the Ukrainian government. It's one of the most corrupt countries in the world. If the Ukrainians, however, if they want to fight to defend themselves, I think we give them what they need to fight by themselves. And do they ultimately prevail in any kind of military conflict with the Russians? No. But it will at least bring the price of conquering Ukraine much higher for the Russians to have to pay.
Holman Jenkins in the Wall Street Journal wrote, "The cards have been dealt. The relationship between Putin and the Western powers will become more militarized. NATO will be reinvigorated. Mr. Putin will get what he's after, an excuse to attack the last vestiges of domestic criticism and opposition to his surrealistically corrupt rule. But whether this will really work for him at this point is a big question." Will this reinvigorate NATO, given what you were just describing as the problem with Germany?
I read that column, and I usually agree with a lot of what Holman Jenkins says, but in this I completely disagree. I think what Putin is showing is that NATO is extremely weak and is extremely fractured, and I don't see NATO getting together again for its purpose of standing up against the former Soviet Union, now Greater Russia. I don't see it unless we somehow figure out a way that European energy comes from someplace other than Russian pipelines.
And so then this worst case scenario, if Putin were to stage a coup or launch a formal military invasion and topple Zelensky and his regime in Kyiv, then now you have a NATO problem because you have NATO countries that would be in Putin's sights, and you have this, all for one, one for all commitment by NATO countries to protect places like the Baltics.
And that's what the worry is that if Putin has whetted his appetite with Ukraine, that it doesn't stop there, that then he's emboldened and then starts going after, as you're right, NATO countries, and then we have a legal obligation to come to their aid. And the place he would go first would be the Baltics, to Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, or the Balkans towards Crimea. I'm less concerned about that. I think it's a definite possibility. I'm much more concerned with the response that China's going to have to this, not what Putin's going to have to his own successes. I think the Chinese are just sitting on the sidelines watching the movie, eating their popcorn, trying to figure out, well, if Putin gets away with Ukraine, can we grab Taiwan? The Americans are so distracted and they're so divided and they're led by such a weak, incompetent leader who is far more concerned with the woke military than he is with a war-fighting military, that maybe the Chinese make their move. And that makes a big difference to us. Why? Because Taiwan is the country by which you control the South China Sea, the world's most important maritime trade route, and also Taiwan is where all the microprocessors and chips that power modern society, 97% of the world's supply comes from Taiwan. If that becomes in the hands of China, talk about supply chain shortages, you're never going to see a car again.
Is there any concern you think Putin has with the probability of success in Ukraine? We talked to your friend Jim Carafano earlier in the week from the Heritage Foundation, and he said, look, the Ukrainians are going to fight, so this is not a fait accompli that he would invade and he would quickly assume control of that country.
I agree. I think that of all the options that I said, from sort of pocketing what he's got now to a coup to an invasion, I think Putin takes the middle ground. I think he forces a coup in Kiev, and I think the pro-Russian leaders will take over, and I think he leaves troops. Russian troops will remain in part of Ukraine, eastern Ukraine. So what does that do for Putin? Well, it gives him nominal control over Ukraine. It gives him access to Ukrainian resources, which are very significant. And it prevents Ukraine from moving to the West, getting Western investment, or most importantly, becoming part of NATO. I think Putin gets all the stuff he wants without having troops going across the border, which can become kind of risky. It'll be a prolonged fight. And then, maybe he gets other countries in Europe to get a little more nervous. I think Putin gets what he wants by taking that middle ground. It doesn't do him any good to have tanks rolling down the grand boulevards of the capital of Ukraine.
And at this point, this is completely in Putin's hands because we've let it get this far. So it's not like even if we took the tack that the Biden administration took the tack you suggested in terms of moving rapidly towards energy independence policies again. I mean, that's not going to happen quickly enough. So we're in sort of a wait and see what Putin does mode, no matter what's done.
I think that's a good assessment, Dan. I mean, Ukraine's a done deal. I mean, Putin has maneuvered this perfectly, and we've screwed it up perfectly, so that I think Ukraine is no longer going to be an option to be a part of NATO or a member of the West. What I'm worried about is what comes next. And the policy I'm talking about, it can't turn on a dime, but it could turn within a year. You have to remember, a year ago, the price of energy was really low. The United States was a net exporter. We were exporting liquefied natural gas to Europe. Our inflation levels were low. The Russians were broke because with low energy prices, Russia wasn't making anything on its exports. So I think that, it went from really terrific to bad in a year. I think it can go from bad to really terrific in a year, but you have to start now.
Does Putin have any respect at all for President Biden?
No.
Never has?
Maybe. But I think Putin saw him in the summer when they had their summit meeting. Putin and Biden met, and I think Putin took a look and said, okay, I've known Biden for years. He seems very diminished. He's not standing up to me, even though my Russian hackers are going in and wreaking havoc in American companies and corporations. And Biden has just given me the green light to make Europe even more dependent on Russian energy by agreeing to the Nord Stream 2. I think if you go back and look at the calendar, when did Putin start making his moves? After he met with Biden. That's when he started reinforcing troops on the border. That's when he issued a manifesto saying Ukraine is historically part of Russia, and so we have every right to it. And then after Afghanistan and our shambolic withdrawal from Afghanistan, I think Putin said, okay, this is my time. I've been waiting 30 years to recreate Greater Russia, and I'm going to start now.
She is KT McFarland, former First Deputy National Security Advisor to President Trump, author of Revolution, Trump, Washington, and We the People. KT, thanks as always.
Thank you, Dan, and thank you, Amy.
Thank you. And she joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
It's news, opinion, insight. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
Biden's massive spending plan has expanded America's money supply and taken money out of your pocket. But you can fight back against runaway inflation by sheltering your IRA or 401k with gold through Birch Gold Group. This is Stephen K. Bannon, and I'm proud to be a customer of Birch Gold. Join me. Birch Gold has created a free info kit on protecting your retirement with gold in a tax-sheltered account. Just text the words SHELTER